Hello there. I am Dr. Andrea Schnowske, and I am here with Health and Horsepower. I am really excited because this week we're actually partnering up with one of our local offices. Inspired Maternity has an online class specifically for women that are dealing with pelvic floor issues, that are either in the midst of pregnancy or post-pregnancy, looking for some help with everything from diastasis recti to pelvic floor issues to core instability to back pain, leg pain, you name it. But I'm really excited because I get to share this video with them. And I think it's really exciting to be able to partner up and help spread the word a little bit more about more holistic healthcare or just knowledge. I think patient education is important. So without further ado, I want to get down to the nitty gritty today. I am doing a video. Today is all about why is weight loss so hard? And I feel like this is very relevant, not only for women, and I think it's especially valid for women, which I'll talk to you more about that why, as I do some of the presentation and talk about that today. But I think it's also valid for men too, because I think when it comes to weight loss and when it comes to healthy weight, there has been a lot of misconceptions. There is a lot of kind of conflicting information. And I feel like if you don't have the right information, you can't make good health decisions. So what I want to do today is kind of get down into it. I will say this is probably a bit more in depth than I'm used to doing on my YouTube channel, but I think it is a lot of great valid information. Also, at the end of this video, I will try, I've never done it before, but I will try to link some other videos that I think will be really helpful, just kind of touching base and expanding upon some of the things that I'm going to be going over today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can kind of get down to it here. All right. And let's go. Okay, it's loading. Gotta wait for the computer. So, like I mentioned, I'm Dr. Andrea Schnowske. I not only am a YouTube creator, so I have a YouTube channel called Health and Horsepower, but I also have a physical office in Peoria, Illinois called Freedom Chiropractic and Holistic Health. So what I want to do, like I said today, is really just kind of get down to the nitty gritty. I will be going very much in depth. So if you don't have a piece of paper and a pen next to you, I would definitely recommend grabbing one because there's going to be a couple things that I will talk about that I think will be very beneficial for you to do your own research, as well as maybe even looking on my YouTube channel for some more videos that may be relevant to you to help educate you so you can make better health decisions, not only for yourself, but your family as well. So I want to first kind of introduce myself. So like I said, I'm Dr. Andrea Schnowske. I'm a chiropractor and holistic healthcare provider in Illinois. I do provide family care. Now, in my office, I focus on the whole entire body. So not just your spine, not just your muscles, but I also focus on organ systems, hormone balance, what you're getting in your diet, and how your body is actually functioning throughout every single organ system. I really feel, and I really strongly believe in this, that if you know how your body functions and heals, you can make better healthcare decisions for yourself and your family, and also be able to find better providers that can help you get down to why it's not working properly. I feel like a lot of times in our current healthcare system, we're very much a crisis care situation. So when we have heartburn, we try to focus on reducing the heartburn rather than finding out why it's there in the first place and how do we correct it so it doesn't keep coming back. Your body has an amazing innate ability to heal itself, and it also has an amazing ability to communicate with you and tell you what's not working properly. If something is not feeling right, or you notice that your body's talking to you and you've been to your doctor already and you've done some lab testing or done some testing and really haven't found results, that doesn't mean you don't have a problem. That just means that your doctor didn't find it. You may need a second opinion. You may need to go to a different doctor that has a different specialty that can provide you some insight. Not all doctors look at things the same way. If you were to go to, say, for example, an orthopedist, they're going to look at joint stability. They're going to look at any type of pathology in the joint, and potentially they may recommend physical therapy, but a lot of times their biggest focus on treatment is going to be a surgery. If you go to, say, for example, your primary care, a lot of times they are looking for pathology, and if you're having pain, their focus is reducing pain. So they would give you muscle relaxers and a pain reliever, or maybe even something like a gabapentin that helps reduce nerve response. If you go to a chiropractor, they're going to look at structural issues. They're going to look to see if the joints are moving properly. They're going to look to see if the nerves are functioning properly. They're going to look to see if the muscles are working together properly. If you go to a holistic provider, they may look at your diet. They may look at labs and organ function to see if there is some type of issue going on. So no matter what kind of provider you go to, sometimes you need a couple second opinions and blend them all together. And of course, you're the best person to do that for yourself because you're truly your own healthcare advocate. So when it comes to weight loss specifically, I have found in my years of practice that when you go to your medical doctor and potentially talk to them about the fact that you're gaining weight or want to lose weight, frequently they have only gotten information in schooling on nutrition and weight loss about 10 hours or less of education. So they might not be the best resource. A lot of people like to focus on some of the newest trends or the newest things in the media about dietary changes. I know right now keto is huge. There's a lot of drawbacks to keto long term. I do think for short term, it's great at helping you drop the weight, but you're also not really working with your body's metabolism. So a lot of times while you are going to be changing your body to burn fat, you're also going to be missing a lot of the electrolytes and nutrition necessary for your body to function and heal. So long term, it is not a good idea. I actually have had patients that did keto for short term, had great results, and then we focused on doing healthy habits after that, and they did amazing with it. But when I've had patients that stayed on keto, they tend to lose muscle mass because their body started literally breaking down muscle because we didn't work with metabolism. And then their metabolism kind of died off and lowered, and then it was a lot easier to gain weight, and they weren't getting results, and it felt like they went backwards, and then they were having joint pain on top of it because they lost muscle stability. So really when it comes down to it, medical doctors may not be the best source. TV personalities, celebrities, your friend, the lady on TV may not be the best resource. So some of those trends can be very dangerous. Like I said, they can cause quick results, but not necessarily sustainable results. I see a lot of issues with hormone imbalance, metabolic syndromes, detoxification pathways that aren't working properly, and then, like I mentioned, muscle atrophy. And that can lead to a lot of issues, not just pain, but also bone density problems. So really important to understand, like I said, how your body functions, how it heals, and that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to talk a little bit more about just weight loss in general and some of the tips or things that I think are really important to understand about how your body functions and things especially that can interfere with weight loss so that you need to make sure you are aware of and addressing those when you are trying to lose weight or trying to get just a healthier body shape, type, whatever you're trying to achieve. But before I do that, I want to share a story with you. I feel like when you kind of understand this story, you'll understand a little bit more about why I'm here, why I'm doing what I'm doing today, and why I'm so passionate about this. So let's get to our story. So imagine you are a 15-year-old girl, okay? So imagine you're a 15-year-old girl kind of in the midst of puberty. You've got, some like security issues with friends and trying to impress people and trying to be a good kid. And you've got all these different pressures on you. Now imagine that you are playing two sports year round. So for example, let's say this gal here, so this 15-year-old, she was playing not only basketball, so she also played softball and was a pitcher. So she practiced pitching year round. Also did ice skating competitively as well as individuals. She traveled the country, going to competitions all over the United States to compete on a national level. And then in addition to playing those sports year round, she also was working out in the gym or doing practice at least 2 hours every day. So whether she was in practice or in the gym doing exercises or doing pitching practice, whatever it may be, she was doing at least 2 hours every single day of exercise to keep her body in fitness condition for the sports and the demands that she put on her body on a daily basis. In addition, in school during the physical education course, she had a National Physical Fitness Award that she was able to win every year. So by all measurements, you can see that she was very active. She was working out. She was physically fit according to the fitness awards. And then on top of that, she was also eating a healthy diet of proteins, fruits, vegetables, and really only eating out and eating unhealthy with friends on weekends typically. And when she went to the doctor, she was told not only by her medical doctor, but also by her orthopedist after she had a knee injury during sports, and also by her gynecologist, who, let me tell you, gynecologist appointments for a 15-year-old girl, very, very awkward. So after being examined, shall we say, in a very awkward situation, and having her gynecologist bring up the situation was a little unnerving, but also her chiropractor told her that she was obese. So imagine that, okay? Now this 15-year-old girl was me. I had been to many different doctors, physically fit, literally in gym, practicing, competing, constantly year-round without breaks to recover and heal. And I was always a little heavier set than my peers, but I also had a very different lifestyle than my peers. By all weights and measures, I was athletic, I was active, I was eating healthy, but I was being told that I was obese. The confidence from that, you can imagine, took a nosedive. So when it comes down to it, I wanted to show you where I measured up. So I'm sure many of you have heard of the basal metabolic index, or BMI. I think a lot of people measure themselves up to this. So at the time, I was 5'4", 5'5". I weighed 175 at the peak of my athletic career when I was a junior and senior in high school. As you can see, whether I was 5'4", oh, hold on, that went forward here. So whether I was 5'4" or 5'5", I weighed at 175. So right here on the line, you can see that this is considered the overweight or obese category. So frequently, every doctor I went to would tell me that I was obese or tell me that I was overweight and I needed to lose weight. And I'm not sure what your doctor tells you when they tell you to lose weight, but usually it's eat healthy and exercise. Pretty sure I already had those things down. So you can imagine being a 15-year-old girl, being told that you're obese by every doctor out there, being, especially comparing yourself to your peers and seeing that you're heavier set, and there is no way in hell that you're going to get any skinnier when you're doing the exercises and activities that you're doing, that you could ever get out of this hole and ever get out of this feeling that you are not enough, that you are overweight, that you are obese, and you're doing everything possible, and you're still being labeled as that. So I want to kind of talk a little bit more about BMI because I think it is, number one, very misleading. I do think it is tremendously harmful to everybody, whether you are a teenager going through puberty, whether you are an adult, whether you are a older individual or geriatric, whatever it may be. I don't care how old you are. This chart is really not the best metric, and we're going to talk about why. So when we look at traditional metrics like BMI, I'm going to say it, and I'll say it a million times, they are a complete lie. So let's talk about what BMI actually is and how it came about. So this guy over here, I'm going to introduce him. This is Adolf Quetelet. So Adolf Quetelet, he was actually a Belgian statistician, a sociologist, an astronomer, and a mathematician. He is the father of the Quetelet Index, which later became BMI. Now, let's think about this. So why in the world would a statistician, a sociologist, an astronomer, and a mathematician create an index or a BMI like this? What was he trying to track? Because let's face it, he's looking at statistics. He's using math to figure out something. What was he trying to answer when he created this? Well, let me tell you. In the 1830s, actuaries, which were the record keepers of that time, were reporting high death rates. So he created this metric to find the values of the average man. Yes, average man, not woman, average man. And he wanted to study patterns in case, we didn't know there was, we never figured it out, it never was linked, there was a link between height and weight and death rate. That is why he created this metric, right? That's it. So he wanted to know, okay, we're going to go ahead and categorize this large group of people on this scale to see if we can figure out why they died. That's literally why he created it. So when we think of it, so I have a little joke here because I feel like I need a little lightheartedness at this point. According to this BMI calculator, I'm too short, right? If we fast forward in time a little bit, so like I said, that was back in 1830s. If we fast forward to 1972, Ansel Keys is a physiologist. At the time, he was basically studying epidemiological research specifically on heart disease to basically try to track rates of heart disease and see if he could manifest that specifically against height and weight. So he stated that this measure, so the Quetelet Index, was essential to quantifying health and was the best available measure of obesity in his research. I don't think I saw anything about obesity in that first one. I don't know if you did, but I didn't. So he renamed this metric the body mass index, or BMI for short. Guess what we're using that for now? Absolutely everything. This is what drives me nuts. So it's been 2 centuries later, doctors, insurance companies are still using this metric, and they're saying that this is the first line of assessment for health to know if you are healthy, right? So they're using your BMI value to figure out your insurance rate. So if you have a higher BMI, if you have a BMI, even if you're an athlete, this BMI is going to dictate whether or not you are healthy. It's going to dictate whether or not you are categorized as overweight or obese, and thus a risk factor, which means it can actually increase your insurance rates and even potentially affect your ability to get life insurance. Then to top it off, if you go to your doctor's office and your doctor uses this metric, they're going to now label you and diagnose you as obese, which is going to be on your medical record. And obesity is going to increase your risk factor for every single type of disease out there, just because they clicked that little button and said, you are considered overweight or obese. And then to top it off, when you do get that lovely label on your chart, every doctor you see is going to look at your BMI and is going to tell you you're overweight. You need to lose weight. That's what's causing your pain. That's what's causing this. That's what's causing this. That's what's causing this. You're overweight, and that's the only problem that you have that contributes to all these other health conditions. So with that in mind, you can tell I don't really have the healthiest of relationships with BMI by my past, as well as the whole reason it was created. So let's share a little bit more about the BMI. So I want you to look at your values, and I'm going to show you how to use this chart. So basically, this chart, it doesn't matter if you're a man, if you are a man or a woman, this chart is the same. So it doesn't matter if you're a man, it doesn't matter if you're a woman, it doesn't matter if you are, say, 6'1" or 6'6". You're going to trace this over. So this is your height, and the top is your weight. So say, for example, you weigh 200 pounds. If you are 4'11", you are considered a class 3 with a BMI of 40. If you scroll down, say you are 200 pounds, but you're 5'7", guess what? Now you're considered class 1 obesity. You have a BMI of 31. Let's say you are 5'11". Guess what? Now you're considered overweight. But if you are 6'4", you are a normal weight. You have a BMI of 24. So if we look at this chart, we can see that BMI of 24 is the only normal value. That's it, 24. That's the only good number. And you have to be between a 19 and a 24 to be considered normal. If you're over that, if you're under that, you're unhealthy. That's the only metric that they use with this calculator. They don't take into consideration that males and females are different. Their body makeup is different. Their body fat percentages are different. None of that. So when it comes to BMI, I have a picture here. This is a group of 6 women. You can tell these women, a lot of them are different heights. A lot of them are different shapes, but guess what? All of them are the same exact weight. So you can see that some of these women do have thicker hip areas, do have thicker waist areas, do have thicker legs. You can see that some of them have larger breasts, some have smaller. All of them are the same exact weight. Now, you may look at this picture and say, some of these look like they're carrying a little extra fat in some areas, and some look perfectly fine. So guess what? All of these women would have a very similar BMI. The one on the end here that is shorter would probably have a little bit higher BMI. The one on the right here would probably have a little bit lower BMI because she is a bit taller. But I want you to realize that BMI does not measure body fat percentage, or consider the fact that low body fat percentage in women can specifically cause hormone issues and infertility. Women have a much different relationship when it comes to fat body percentage and hormones. If the fat percentage in your body is not correct, is not the right balance, you will have issues where you do not ovulate. You will have issues where you cannot produce the hormones necessary to help things function, not just with fertility hormones like estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, but also with adrenal hormones, also with thyroid hormones. A lot of these other hormones in your body are also stored and managed through fat. So I want you to realize that this BMI also does not measure hip or waist circumference, because we've also seen some correlation in the research with hip and waist circumference with cardiovascular risk and obesity risk for other health issues like heart disease, cancer, and things like that. It also does not look at the fact that we have muscle and fat densities that are different. So for example, if you have 5 pounds of muscle, it's going to take up a much smaller space, about 20% of the space that 5 pounds of fat, which is much larger, is going to take up. So in reality, if we have somebody that has a higher muscle mass, right? So if we have somebody that is an athlete, for example, that is working out, that is doing sports or doing a, say, physically labor-intensive job and is working and moving and using their muscles and building their muscles all day long, they're going to have more muscle, which means they're also going to be more dense and they're going to weigh more. It doesn't mean they're unhealthy. It just means that they have more muscle mass. But when it comes down to it, BMI does not take this into consideration. It doesn't even look at the fact that different races have different densities of muscle mass, have different bone densities. It doesn't even take into consideration the fact that you were a male or a female, even though we know without a shadow of a doubt from all the research out there that men have a lower body fat percentage and women cannot healthily have a body fat percentage that is low. Typically, the borderline metric, which we'll talk about a little bit, we'll talk about those actual percentages and what is considered normal and abnormal when we talk about body fat percentages later. But I want you to realize BMI is not a one-size-fits-all. It's great at looking at large populations. It is not good to individually compare yourself against this method. So for today, what we are going to do is we're going to talk about transforming weight loss expectations and the metrics you use to measure whether you are healthy or not. We are also going to talk about sustainable eating habits for a healthy weight for your body specifically and your activity levels. We're also going to talk about how hormones play a part in your weight loss. And we're going to talk about how toxins, they have a huge part in this, can also be eliminated safely without causing damage to your other organ systems. So let's have fun. Let's get learning. If you don't already have your notebook next to you with a paper or with a pen or something to write with, I would highly recommend it. If you've got kids, grab a crayon and make sure you have lots of paper because crayons have to write big. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about expectations and what type of metrics do work. So like I mentioned before, BMI, not a good metric. But I really want you to understand that metrics are also not the end all be all. We want to focus on health, not necessarily numbers. Everybody's body is different. Everybody's activity levels and what they do with their body is different. Everybody's ethnicity is different. And that can play a part into what is healthy for you. So what I typically recommend is that we actually do body measurements and track them over time so that you can see when you are changing your diet, when you are changing your exercise program, how you are progressing over time compared with you. You can compare yourself to you, but when you compare yourself to BMI, not very accurate. So we don't want to really compare to that BMI chart or the average man, especially if you're a woman. So those tracking measurements, which we'll talk about at the end of this slide here, what I typically recommend tracking. I also want you to understanding that when you track inch measurements in multiple body areas, it will also tell you if you're targeting the right areas in your exercise program, and it'll also tell you where you're losing inches. Because say, for example, you are working core and you are strengthening that core area, we may see that our waist and hips sizing goes down. And that'll tell us, hey, my core workout's working. I am seeing shrinking, which means we are shrinking or basically losing fat weight in that area. That's how you know your exercise routine and your diet is effective. The other thing that I think is really important is also tracking your body fat percentage. So on the right side of the screen, I have a picture of someone using a tape measure. Typically, I do find tape measures work amazing because you probably have one at home. You can use a tape measure and a mirror and measure your own body measurements and track those yourself. You don't necessarily need to go to a doctor. If you're not sure where to start, I do recommend getting a baseline with a doctor's office or a trainer or somebody that is trained and knows how to do these measurements and help you track them over time. Body fat percentage is on the bottom picture here. So there are many different ways to measure body fat percentage. There are these brand new scales out there that are amazing and expensive, that actually will send an electrical impulse up through your feet and sometimes even through your hands if it's got the handholds, and it'll actually measure your body fat percentage and tell you how much of that is basically around your organs, how much of that is like your fat storage, and it'll also tell you how much your muscle and your bone density is, because it has basically the technology to be able to measure those. I have seen some research that has suggested that those aren't necessarily the best, because sometimes if you have your arms to the side of your body when you're using those, sometimes what will happen is we'll actually see that when your arms are touching your body, we get a different wavelength and a different speed coming back, and that can affect those measurements. So I'm not a big fan of those machines. I think they're great. They are absolutely amazing that they can take those measurements, spit out a paper that has all that stuff written up for you. I'm sure some of the more expensive ones probably have different ways to go around the interference if the hands are not positioned properly. But I do think that I like the plain old-fashioned tape measure and a fat caliper. So this actually will pinch skin folds. So there are many different ways to do this, but typically I do a 7 skin fold measurement. So we get a great idea about kind of where we have fat deposits underneath the skin. And this way we can actually track how much fat, or like how much fat we have under the skin. So we can actually do those measurements and we can track those over time and plug them into a body fat percentage calculator to come up with numbers that tell us basically your BMI, which usually doesn't change much when we're doing some of these exercise programs, and I'll talk more about that later. But it'll also help us to track your body fat percentage, and it'll help us track how much fat you're losing, how much muscle you're gaining, so that we can actually figure out your basal metabolic rate and figure out how much calories your body is burning just simply by existing. Because when you have higher muscle mass, your muscle burns more calories than fat does, because fat is like a useless storage tissue. Yes, there is purpose for it, but it's basically a useless storage tissue. Your muscle is working, burning, constantly moving. Even if you have muscle and you sit on the couch, it's still burning calories. Now, if you put that muscle into work in the gym or a workout or doing something, it's going to burn more calories. So typically when I do basal metabolic rate for patients that are coming in and I do a basal metabolic rate calculator, I plug their body fat percentage in, I plug their actual like weight and height and age and everything else, because you are also going to have a basal metabolic rate and a body fat percentage categories that are different depending on your age. So it's very important to realize that body fat percentage, like metrics and normals, change as you age. Basal metabolic rates change as you age. So as you age, typically you are going to lose less calories. You are going to have less muscle mass. Now, there are ways to counteract that. However, in general, again, general, not you specifically, but general, because in general, we will see that we will lose muscle mass as we age. So we need to make sure we protect those bones and make sure that we understand these things better. So one of the things that I usually say is, when you have more muscle, you are going to have a higher basal metabolic rate, which is going to make it easier for you to lose weight because you burn calories by just existing in space, sitting on the couch, sleeping, whatever, you're burning those calories. When it comes to those metrics, so like I measure body measurements using a tape measure, I usually recommend measuring around the neck, kind of at the largest point, typically around your thyroid gland. If you have a thyroid condition and you have, say, an autoimmune disease, in your thyroid gland may swell, that may not be the best way to track things for you specifically. But we can also do a measurement above the thyroid if that is you, to again track body fat around the neck. I also recommend doing a measurement around your arm. You do need to do it a certain measurement above the elbow, not necessarily at the widest point. Of course, if you're doing metrics and you're going to be measuring at the widest point, you may notice that over time, as you lose some of that fat, that widest point may change position. So usually I find that measuring inches, a couple inches above the elbow, works best so that we can track that over time. I also recommend doing a measurement around your chest, because some women, not all of them, I was one of the not all of them, that your chest size, so not necessarily breast size, but also your lovely love handles, kind of the back fat, as some people like to call it, will also change in size as you do an exercise program, especially if you're focusing on upper body or back exercises that will also change shape. I also recommend doing a measurement around the waist at the belly button level and then at the hips. Now your hips actually, your pelvis is kind of shaped like an hourglass almost. So we want to do a measurement at the widest point there because typically, especially in women, we tend to put more of our body fat around our chest and around our hip and waist area. So if you're tracking your waist and your hip, you're going to have fat overlying those bones. So if we measure around the hip bones themselves, we'll see as that fat deposit gets smaller, we can see a difference in the measurement. And then I also recommend doing a measurement above your kneecap. Usually I say about 2 to 3 inches above, because again, if you have lovely deposits in your legs, especially on the back of your thighs or inner thighs, and we see that change, if you measure at the widest point, again, that may change. So I recommend doing 2 to 3 inches above the knee. I also recommend for that we want to be standing when we're doing the actual measurement with the measuring tape so that we can track that a little bit better. When it comes to the body fat percentage measurements, like I said, there are many different ways to do that. I typically like the 7 skin fold measurement where I'm taking measurements at 7 different areas of the body. I do recommend for those that we are relaxed position, so we don't have our arms lifted up, we're not standing, but it is better to either be standing for some of the upper body measurements. For the lower body measurements, I do recommend either laying down or sitting so that we can get an accurate pole to measure that skin fold. And then typically when you do calculate body fat percentage, it will also tell you your lean mass or your muscle mass. So it'll tell you how many pounds of your weight is muscle. And it'll also tell you how many pounds of your fat or how many pounds of your body weight is fat. So you actually know how many pounds of fat do I have on my body to potentially lose. It gives you a much better idea. A lot of times when people come into my office and they say they want to lose weight, I'm like, well, how much do you want to lose? They're like, well, my BMI says I should lose 50 pounds. Well, that may not necessarily be accurate for you. So what I usually do is figure out where we're at body percentage wise so we can set a goal as to where we want to change. So say, for example, we are in an unhealthy body fat percentage. We may want to drop down 5, 10, 20% to get into a healthy range. And we would be able to figure out by that body fat percentage what an ideal weight should be, or what an ideal like body fat or like muscle mass or body mass percentage should be. So we'll be able to kind of figure out, okay, so if we change our body fat percentage from 30 to say 22, we know we have to drop 8%. We can actually figure out, okay, so if I have this much fat, how many actual fat pounds do I have to lose to get into that? It's a lot easier to have a smaller goal, like say 10 pounds of fat rather than 50 pounds because of a BMI scale. It's a little bit better to track that. It's easier to see how you're progressing towards your goal too. So let's talk a little bit about fat, because I know I kind of alluded to this earlier, but when it comes to fat storage is essential. So we have essential fat. So this is basically the minimum percentage that our body needs to protect our organs, because we need to have fat protecting our organ systems from damage. So if we fall down the stairs, we don't have a kidney punctured from our lungs because there's no fat cushioning that fall. That fat also will insulate to help keep us warm when we have weather changes, which we all know in the Midwest, we definitely have weather changes here. That fat is also responsible for helping us to store vitamins. Yes, your fat storage does store not only energy storage, but also vitamins as well. That fat also will help us to build steroid messengers. So I mentioned hormones. Those hormones help not only with cellular communication so that we can have our cells talking to each other, telling us to make hormones, help with digestion, help functioning for fertility and things like that. But those same steroid hormones also help in our neurologic pathways in the brain. So that can help with anxiety and depression, and also immune function. So we can also see if we don't have proper food store or fat storage, that we can also see immune systems decline. Now, here's the biggest thing that I want you to understand why BMI is wildly misleading. So in research, we have found that men need a minimum of 3% essential fat to function and basically uphold all of these lovely things I just talked about. Women need 12%, bare minimum. So that means that you need 12% body fat to basically just function. That's it, function. Now, if you have certain genetics, if you are doing certain types of things, like say you're working outside, you might need more for insulation. You might need more for some of that storage mechanism and some of those essential fats. But this is absolute bare minimum that your body has to have to function well. Now, men don't use fat for hormones. They use brain function to stimulate organs to make hormones, not fat. Women, we need fat. So we need a minimum of 12%. Now, there are different types of fat. So if we look at this picture on the right, I have a picture showing you that basically we have visceral fat, which is going to be around the viscera or our organ system. So typically in our abdominal cavity, protecting our organs. Then we have a layer of muscle. And then we have subcutaneous fat, which is more of our storage fat. So when it comes down to it, when we look at visceral fat, if you were to look at your body fat percentage, about 10% on average, again, average, of your fat percentage should be around the organ systems. If we have a high protein diet and we engage in moderate exercises, that can be kept low, not lower than 10%, but at least 10%, but that can be kept lower. So if you tend to have high visceral fat, you may want to engage in a high protein diet and focus on moderate intensity exercise. Not cardio, moderate intensity exercises that will help you build muscle. Now, subcutaneous fat, that's again, just energy storage. Again, it does have other purposes, but for the most part, that's going to be the fat that we want to work on reducing. If we have high fat levels, you may also have higher levels around your visceral. The visceral fat is going to be more dangerous because it can actually press on organs and affect body function. So for the most part, we want a healthy visceral fat. After we get a healthy visceral fat, then we would want to work on reducing subcutaneous fat. So I'm going to give you an example because let's face it, story time is fun. It helps us to kind of see real life examples so we can compare ourselves. So let's compare a man that is 6'1" and 320 pounds. So let's say he came into our office, we measured his height, we measured his weight, and then we did his body fat percentage and we calculated, and I'm going to pull my head over here so you can see a little better. So we calculated using that 7 skin fold that he has a 23.4% body fat. As a male, he's 6'1", he's 37, and his fat mass, so how much fat he actually has on his body that exists, is 74.9 pounds. So this is the amount of fat that he could withstand to reduce down if he wants to reduce body fat percentage and get more toned up. Now, lean mass, this is the actual muscle mass that exists on his body. So that means he has 245.1 pounds of muscle on his body. So most of his body weight is actually muscle, not fat. So if he wanted to look, and we'll look at this later, but if you want to look at that BMI, we would see that his BMI is a 42.2. Guess what? That is in super red zone. Oh my gosh, lights flaring. He is in the super obese category. He's going to die, right? Not necessarily, because if we look at it, his body fat percentage is in a healthy range. Now, I really like American Council on Exercise's body fat percentage categories because I think it helps you see it a little bit more that we can have different activity levels that can affect this. So essential fat, we talked about, men have to have a minimum of 3%. So essential fat, according to the American Council of Exercise, is 2 to 5.9%. So for him, that would be 250 to 260. For athletes, we want to have a body fat percentage of 6 to 13, and that's going to be a little bit heavier. If we are in fitness and doing workouts, maybe not necessarily a professional athlete, we want to get to a 14 to 17.9. But acceptable ranges for body fat percentage at this age specifically, and at this height and weight and everything else, we would want to see a percentage of about 18 to 24.9. So again, he falls in the acceptable range, even though the BMI chart is screaming lights, bells, and whistles that he is not good average man. So obese at his age is going to be 25% or more. Now, let's look at a woman because we know women need more fat. So let's look at a woman's measurements. Let's say we have a woman. I know this isn't like a typical woman. I think average height for a woman is like 5'9", but we're going to just we're going to play devil's advocate. We're going to say that we have a woman that is also 6'1" and 320 pounds. Now, we calculated her body fat percentage using the same exact skin fold measurements because women's body makeup, their bone density is completely different. So her body fat percentage is actually 30%. So that means that of her 320 pounds, 96 pounds of that is fat. That is our potential fat loss percentage to reduce that body fat. Her lean mass is 224 pounds. So that means that 224 pounds over 320 is muscle mass. Her BMI, guess what? It's the same exact as the male's. Is also screaming bells, lights, and whistles. Oh my gosh, category 4, we're in big trouble here. But if we actually look at the female body fat percentage, so essential fat, like I said, typically needs to be around 12%. So according to the American Council on Exercise, she would need 10 to 13%. For athletes, 14 to 20. For fitness, 20 to 24. And for acceptable range at her age, which is also 37, I didn't change that, is going to be 25 to 31.9%. So again, she is also in the acceptable range. So for women of this age, obesity would be considered 32% body fat or more. So you can see that when we look at this lovely BMI here, so they're both 6'1", they're both 320 pounds, they're both considered a 42. Guess what? They're in crazy class 3 obesity, lights, bells, whistles, oh my gosh, you're overweight, obese. But in reality, their body fat percentage, because of their activity level, I know they're hypothetical, but hypothetically speaking, based on their body fat percentage and based on how much of their body is muscle, they would technically be a BMI that's overweight, but have a healthy body fat percentage and thus a good body composition. Okay, so let's do another story time. So 37-year-old male has given up on multiple weight loss programs and workouts because he was not seeing results. He mentioned that typically about like 1 to 2 months in, he just gives up because he's like, I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. He tried keto. He did lose weight and he was really happy with his results. But right after he stopped eating keto, he gained everything back quickly. And he noticed that his stress, his smoking habits were definitely interfering with his ability to lose weight. So we sat down, we talked about his dietary habits. So he wasn't eating frequent meals. So we started with saying, okay, we're going to eat more often. We're going to make sure you're getting enough protein so that we can fuel body muscle building to increase your metabolism. And we also changed up his exercise. So he was going to the gym and he was there for like 2 hours. He was like, oh yeah, I do, cardio and I do elliptical and I do stair stepper. And then I lift weights for a little bit. I said, okay, let's change this up a little bit. So we said, okay, go ahead and do cardio for a little bit and do like a warm up and stretching. I said, but then I want you to really focus on weight lifting and let's cut your time in the gym. So we actually focused on doing about half an hour minimum of actual like resistance exercise, weightlifting to focus on muscle building. We tracked his progress over 2 months. And this is what we found. So initially when he came in, his BMI was 47.5. So again, lights, bells, whistles, oh my gosh, we're doing awful here. His initial weight weighed in at 360 and his initial body fat percentage was 30.1%. So as we know from before, looking at a 37-year-old male in this age range, 30% was considered obese. So we needed to get that body fat percentage down. So his muscle mass was 251. So we had 251 pounds of muscle and we had 108 pounds of fat that we have potential to lose. We calculated his basal metabolic rate, so a number of calories that his body was burning just by existing, sleeping, sitting on the couch, doing nothing. And then what we did was we checked it again in a month. His weight went down 1 single pound, right? So his BMI stayed essentially the same. But when we actually calculated his body fat percentage, he lost 3% body fat. He actually gained 9, almost 10 pounds of muscle, and he lost 10 pounds of fat. So he literally lost 10 pounds of fat, gained 9 pounds of muscle. He literally added 100 calories of basal metabolic rate so that he was actually burning more calories just by existing in space. Now, the next month he came in, he had actually quit smoking. So he was dealing with a lot of cravings, a lot of inflammation, some really unhealthy eating habits. He's like, I don't know. He's like, I don't think we're going to see great results. I don't have high expectations for today, but I'm here, let's do it. So we did his measurements. His weight did go up 4 pounds. Again, when you quit smoking, you detox, so your body typically will have higher levels of inflammation. I said, well, chances are some of that may be inflammation, not necessarily fat gain. So then we calculated his body fat percentage. Guess what? Even though he had horrible habits, didn't eat healthy, he still dropped body fat percentage. He gained almost 5 pounds of muscle in that month, even not really having the best habits. And he did gain like 0.5 pound of fat back, but in reality, his basal metabolic rate continued to increase. So even if you're not 100%, we still saw improvement. So I was really excited because not only did he get 14 pounds of muscle gained in this time period, he lost 9 pounds of fat, and he actually lost 5 inches. So he literally shrunk his body in multiple areas and increased his metabolism in this 2-month time period simply by changing what he was eating and changing his diet and exercise. I was really excited for him. I'm really excited to see how he progresses further. But I think he just really felt excited to be able to see like, oh my gosh, so what I'm doing is working. And even though I had a bad month, I've still progressed, just not as quickly as I would have liked to see. So let's talk about the sustainable eating habits. I mentioned them in the previous slide, but I will say this because I think this is so important to understand. Digestive issues are the #1 problem I see in my office when people are trying to lose weight. So for some patients that come in, they may have some issues where they're having stomach acid issues. So they may have where they are noticing heartburn or reflux or noticing that they're feeling full for a very long time. Now, keep in mind, as you age, stomach acid production goes down. When that happens, you are not going to be able to break down your food properly. You're not going to be able to absorb nutrition that needs to be absorbed in the stomach properly, specifically nutrients that can only be absorbed mostly in the stomach and the small intestine. Then on top of that, I've also had patients that have gallbladder issues. So when they eat fatty foods, they tend to have digestive upsets. They may have floating stool, or if they've had a gallbladder removed, that doesn't allow them to break down fats or absorb some of the essential nutrients that are stored in fats properly. And another big one I see is gut bacteria imbalance. So you have good bacteria in your stomach, that or in your intestine, not your stomach, good bacteria in your large intestine, not your small intestine. So if you get bloating about, I would say, half an hour to an hour after eating, especially like right below your rib cage area, so it almost looks like you're pregnant, that is a good sign that you have bacteria growing in your small intestine where they're not supposed to be. And a lot of times that came from the stomach problem I talked about earlier. But when we see bacteria imbalance, so if we have the good bacteria not at the proper levels or not growing, they are not going to be digesting your food. They're not going to be making vitamins and minerals. They're not going to be making natural antibiotics for a strong immune system. They're not going to be protecting your intestine, so it tends to get irritated faster. And as a result, we can see not only diarrhea and quick trips to the bathroom, we can also see like gas pain, we can see bloating, we can see all different types of things, but typically I see more issues with gas pain, diarrhea, bloating. Those are kind of the top 3 that I see with that gut bacteria imbalance. But all of those things cause inflammation and stress on the body that affect your hormones and lower metabolism, so it makes it harder to lose weight. So if you have a digestive issue and you haven't gotten it checked out and you haven't gotten to the root of why it's there and how to get rid of it, rather than just cover up symptoms with Tums or something like that, you need to get that addressed. But when it comes to sustainable eating habits, so if you have digestive issues, please get those checked out and managed properly. But after that, we want to make sure that we have more focused and more regular meals, because if we're eating every 3 hours, that's going to help to make sure your blood sugar doesn't do a roller coaster ride. So if you eat breakfast and say you maybe not eat the healthiest of breakfast, say you have cereal or a bagel with cream cheese or something like that, or something like, just that breaks down quickly into sugars, it's going to spike your blood sugar up, and then your body's going to have to respond and get that blood sugar back down. And typically, because if we're doing high sugar stuff all the time, your body's like, oh my gosh, we over respond, and then our blood sugar crashes, and we get moody, we get tired, we get hungry, we get irritable, and then we have to, oh my gosh, I need coffee or sugar, or I need a Mountain Dew, or I need chocolate, or a quick snack or chips or something from the vending machine. Blood sugar goes up again, and then it crashes again. So we have the roller coaster ride of blood sugar, tends to cause major issues. not just for hormones, for your metabolism too. So I recommend eating more stably. So every 3 to 4 hours, you want to be snacking on something. That's going to help so that you're getting regular blood sugar so it doesn't do roller coaster rides. And it's going to boost your metabolism because your body's like, oh, okay, she's feeding me regularly. We can go ahead and work on burning stuff rather than putting everything in storage because we don't know when our next meal is going to come. Because if you only eat, say, 1 or maybe 2 meals a day, in the meantime, your body's like, I don't know what to do. We need to put everything in storage because we're starving during the day. So you can actually work against yourself if you're not eating more frequently. Now, the most important thing when you are eating these little snacks throughout the day, we want to make sure they are balanced. If you're only eating sugar, you're going to have your roller coaster ride. So we want to balance that. I usually say if you're going to have sugar, you want protein with it. So what I recommend is for these snackies, or whatever you want to call them, 1 handful, so the palm size. So typically I would say a serving size of protein will be 2 eggs, 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, handful of mixed nuts, or about 4 ounces of brown rice, beans, or any type of other protein source. Typically around 15 to 20 grams of protein is kind of a good goal. So 1 handful of protein, 1 handful of fruits and veggies. So that may be apples and peanut butter. That may be, say, grapes and cheese. That may be trail mix with some dried fruit in it. Whatever works for you, but typically protein and the fruits and vegetables together, because your protein is going to help balance so your blood sugar doesn't do the crazy up and down. It'll help so it breaks down slower. And then the fruits and vegetables are not only going to give you fiber, which is going to help you feel full, it's also going to feed those good bacteria I talked about in the intestines. And to top it off, it's giving you vitamins and minerals. So really important for that. And then the other thing is that protein is highly important too. Not only building muscle, it also makes up your enzymes. It makes up neurotransmitters in your brain for brain function, mood stability, and your hormones. Everything from thyroid function to fertility to, again, mood to basically every function in your body focuses on enzymes and hormones in order to work properly. So it's really interesting. But if you've ever seen, there's actually a video that's been going around on, I think it was Instagram, I saw it. But it basically shows that we have a protein basically bringing serotonin to the brain. So literally it's taking, and this myosin is walking across a filament in the brain, dragging this big, huge serotonin to cause happiness. So literally that's a picture of happiness. It's a video of seeing somebody get happy because that serotonin is going to their brain, which is really interesting. I thought it was, I don't know, kind of a topic, but I thought it was kind of neat. The other thing to keep in mind is we also want to focus on eating enough protein. So on average, if we are trying to build muscle mass, which if you're trying to lose weight, you really do want to focus on building muscle mass. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to bulk up. You may just tone up more. We don't necessarily have to have big bodybuilder muscles to build muscle. You want to aim for about 3/4 gram per pound of body weight. So if you're 100 pounds, 75 grams of protein. If you're just trying to maintain, so say for example, you're in maybe a healthy body fat percentage, you don't necessarily want to lose fat, but you want to tone up, then I would focus on 0.5 gram. So if you're 100 pounds, 50 grams of protein daily is going to be your goal. We also want to make sure that we are also getting not just water, but electrolytes. So electrolytes help to prevent muscle spasms. They help to keep your kidney and your liver functioning well. And those also help to make sure that we're getting signaling throughout our body and everything's working properly. So I do recommend electrolytes at least once a day. Magnesium is one that I think is very, very overlooked and frequently about 70% of the time deficient in a lot of my patients. So magnesium helps with muscle relaxation. So we need calcium to contract, magnesium to relax. So if you tend to have muscle spasms, cramping, Charlie horses, most likely you are deficient in magnesium. Now, if you've had blood testing done, you're like, oh, my magnesium level says it's fine. Guess what? That magnesium is mostly stored inside of red blood cells and other tissues. So a serum or blood like volume measurement, so a blood serum of magnesium is not accurate. Red blood cell magnesium is a better idea of what you have in storage to help with your muscles with recovery. So definitely recommend that you're getting at least 400 milligrams. That can be through a combination of food and supplements. You may want to check if you're taking a multivitamin or you're taking a supplement already, or you're taking a electrolyte, that it may already have some magnesium in there, but typically your body needs a minimum of 350. with absorption rates of good magnesium, so like magnesium citrate or glycinate. There's other sources out there. I usually recommend against magnesium oxide. Those also do contribute to kidney stones as well as gallbladder stones. So typically I say stay away from the oxide stuff or the carbonates, but magnesium citrate or glycinate are probably the most common ones that I recommend. You want to aim for about 400 so that when you absorb, you're at least getting that 350. Now, hormones play a big part too. So like I mentioned, there are a couple things. I'm not going to go super in detail. This is one of them. I will touch on these things. I will try to link at the end of this video some other videos I've done on our YouTube channel that may be helpful for you. But how hormones play a part in weight loss, I think is super important, because if we are having lifestyle factors that are interfering with hormone balance, or say we have autoimmune conditions that are interfering with hormone balance, that's going to really put some hampering on how your metabolism works. So 3 main hormones that I worry about, and I'm going to focus a little bit more on the last one because I think it's the one that is most misunderstood. But we'll talk about the first one, which I already mentioned a little bit, is insulin. So remember we talked about the lovely roller coaster ride? So when your blood sugar increases, your body will release insulin to get that down and under control and send that sugar into the cells. If we have a diet or a lifestyle that we're getting a lot of the ups and downs all the time, your body tends to start throwing more insulin out there than necessary because your cells are like, listen, you keep releasing so much, and they start ignoring it. And we get a condition called insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is when your cells basically ignore insulin signaling, and we need more insulin produced so that we can get the same blood sugar reduction. Now, if you've heard of pre-diabetic conditions or insulin resistance or polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS, or if you have heard of women that have been put on metformin specifically when they are trying to become fertile or trying to lose weight, or even just patients that are diabetic already and are already on medications that help with insulin sensitivity, typically what happens is when we have insulin resistance for a long period of time, that can lead to fertility issues like PCOS. That can lead to fertility issues where we're not getting proper hormone balance because that insulin tends to interfere with a lot of different things. But the other thing too is insulin basically helps to take sugar into your cells so your body can either use it or store it away in fat cells for later use. Now, when insulin is high, that will actually cause stress on the adrenal gland. When insulin is high, your body will physically shut down pathways to break down fat. So if you have a high insulin, if you have a diet that has trained your body into having insulin resistance, or if you've had, say, for example, either a pre-diabetic condition or you are type 2 diabetic, typically you have insulin resistance. Eventually what tends to happen is people that have insulin resistance over a long time or chronically can eventually get to a type 2 diabetic condition can happen if we don't address that. I have found when I have patients that have insulin resistance, typically we can start retraining that. It takes about a minimum of 2 weeks to retrain your body's blood sugar balance. That 2 weeks is rough. It's almost like a detoxification because your body is basically relearning how to make and respond to insulin and relearning how to use and store blood sugar. But there is basically a 2-week plan where you can reduce your sugar intake. So basically you're focusing on proteins as well as vegetables. And there's also some other things you need to do along with that to support, your body and your organ systems that are trying to do that process. But usually during that time period, I warn you, you will have headaches because your body is used to the up and down. And when you're not even giving enough sugar to get the up, your body's going to be like hungry all the time. So typically I recommend snacking throughout the day on veggies and protein. We will need to be eating very frequently, sometimes even every 2 hours if your insulin resistance is very high to retrain that. But insulin resistance can be, for some people, temporary. So if you've ever heard of gestational diabetes where your blood sugar is imbalanced during pregnancy, again, you can retrain that. It's very rough to do during pregnancy, much better to do before you get pregnant and try to get that under control before you become pregnant. Because let's face it, those blood sugar test screenings are not fun at all. I've also had some patients that did fail the blood sugar screenings when they were pregnant. And a lot of that was due to the fact that they eat a healthy diet that manages their blood sugar and insulin, But when they do the test, which is like straight up processed sugar, way crazy high, their body does over respond. But they manage that with diet already. And for those patients, I have recommended doing basically a 2-week blood sugar testing with basically their doctors, kind of talking with their doctor about, hey, listen, I eat this kind of diet. When you do this test, yes, I failed the test because I don't eat that way. A lot of times you can actually do an alternative test where you would check blood sugar multiple times throughout the day, before and after eating, 2 hours after eating, over like a 1 to 2 week time period. And as long as your blood sugars are staying in like a good range, a lot of times your doctor can accept that as another option. I've also had some patients that have allergies to some of the color and flavor additives that were in that test. So they got like horrifically sick after doing that test. So that was a good option for them. But like I said, insulin, super important because it is going to shut down fat loss and also interfere with how your body can manage and store blood sugar. Another one that's really important to understand is when you look at artificial sweeteners. So when you have sweetness touch your tongue, your body says, oh, we got sweets coming in. Let's produce that insulin so we can help it get into our cells quick. But if you have artificial sweeteners or basically a no sugar condition coming in, so say you have an artificial sweetener that tastes sweet on your tongue, and then you eat that food and there's no sugar, your body's like, okay, I release all this insulin. There's nothing to grab. There's no sugar to do. Guess what? Your hormones are going to stay high, still cause the same exact hormone effect, even if you're having a no sugar. So I am not a big proponent of artificial sweeteners. There are some natural sweeteners out there available like stevia, monk fruit, honey, things like that, that can be great options to use. They're a little bit healthier because they do have some fiber along with them, and they are processed a little bit differently, more like a fiber, not like a sweetener. Like most artificial sweeteners are literally recognized sugar. We got sugar coming in. Whereas a lot of these natural options are recognized more as a fiber because they're from the lettuce family, or they're just processed differently in your body. Another thing to think about is serotonin. So I mentioned that lovely Instagram video, the myosin dragging the lovely serotonin to the brain for happiness. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that also acts like a hormone in other areas of your body. So in your brain, serotonin is your happy hormone. It helps with mood stability. It helps with motivation. It actually will basically stop anxiety and depression. But serotonin is also used in your digestive system. So serotonin, about 95% is used in your intestines to not only help with immune function, but also help in your stomach. When serotonin, basically when you eat, you get a fullness in your stomach and your body will say, okay, we're full, stop eating. But if we have, say, protein deficiencies, or if we have some neurotransmitter imbalances or hormone imbalances, your body may not be producing and recognizing that neurotransmitter properly. You may not get that signal saying, okay, we had enough, you can stop eating now. And then you keep eating and eating and eating and eating until you feel that stomach stretch and like, oh, it hurts, I can't eat anymore. Not, I ate enough, but I can't fit anything more in my stomach. And we can actually get stomach stretching that can not only interfere with digestion because your stomach's not as efficient if things can't move around because it's stuffed full, but we can also see where if we have a stomach that is stretched, we're going to tend to overeat to fill our stomach, especially if we're not looking at this. So a lot of times, if I have patients that have either been not eating regular meals throughout the day and they tend to do more binge eating or large meals multiple times where they're stretching their stomach, we may need to kind of, because they're not going to have a lot of times that hormone that tells them, hey, you're hungry, or hey, you're full, stop eating. We may actually have to retrain that. So kind of in that same 2-week time period that I was talking about with insulin, usually we can do a 2-week, like super intense dietary change where we are forcing ourselves to eat every 3 to 4 hours. I usually say, eat breakfast, 3 to 4 hours later, have a snack. If you're not hungry, you might need to set an alarm to remind yourself, have a snack. Once your body kind of gets into the condition like, okay, we eat at this time, we expect more food at this time, you may start getting some of that, especially if you're getting more protein, you may start getting some of that hormone and enzyme production where you start getting hungry and also feeling full. You get hungry when you're supposed to, and you feel full sooner than you think. So a lot of times too, because it does take time for you to chew your food and get that down to the stomach before that signal is out, if you eat too quickly, sometimes you again overeat, and then we have that same stomach stretching condition. So it's really important to realize that we may have to retrain a lot of your eating habits to get some of these hormone changes as well. And the last one I want to talk about is cortisol. So a lot of people know cortisol as the stress hormone. So when your body is under stress, and there's lots of different types of stress. So say, for example, you're sitting at work and your coworker or boss yells at you, oh my gosh, we have this deadline. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Every single time you get worked up, emotional, heightened awareness, your body kicks into gear, fight or flight. We need to do something to deal with this problem, stress. That's one type of stress. We can also have blood sugar imbalances or another type of stress. If we're not getting enough sleep, that causes stress. If we have inflammation, that causes stress. If we have food allergies or sensitivities, that causes stress. So there's a lot of things in our life that can cause stress. A lot of it comes down to understanding where those stressors come from and trying to minimize some of that fight or flight, like constantly all the time. Because when we have that fight or flight activated all the time, that's going to change how your brain works. That's going to change how your hormones are produced, and your body is in a constant state of heightened awareness. I see this a lot with people that have had traumatic childhoods, not necessarily like physical abuse, but we can also see emotional programming or emotional abuse, as well as sometimes even some familial and generational trauma where we're passing ideals and expectations down to our children. If you haven't looked into that or know anything about that, I can provide you with some more information about that. I know that is a huge one that I think is very misunderstood and overlooked by a lot of different people, some of that generational trauma and how that affects overall body function. But I've actually seen in my practice and in my own life as well, that when you have grown up with some of those expectations and some of those generational trauma kind of expectations as to how things should work or should be, or what's normal, what's not normal, you may actually program yourself to automatically respond a certain way or constantly think and plan ahead and kind of people please and things like that. That can be detrimental to your physical and emotional health too. So that's something for another time. But I think that cortisol is really important. And I want to tell you a little bit more about cortisol and how it has long-reaching effects, because I think a lot of people don't realize how much cortisol plays a part into your body systems. So we're going to go through my lovely explanation of the adrenal gland, which is where cortisol is produced. So let's get into it. So I call the adrenal gland the queen gland, or if you're a male, the king gland. So she or he runs the show. Your adrenal gland is your fight or flight response. So anytime you have a stress in your life, whether that is physical, mental, emotional, inflammatory, not sleeping, whatever it may be, your gland says, oh my gosh, fight or flight, we need to deal with this. So either we can fight against that, we can flight, run away and avoid, or we can freeze and just kind of like internalize and deal with it. So your gland will produce a hormone called cortisol. That cortisol and also your brain programming will kind of dictate whether you are fight, flight, or freeze. Cortisol levels should be high in the morning. Yes, cortisol is supposed to be high in the morning. Cortisol helps you wake up for the day, stimulate your metabolism. So you eat breakfast like, okay, I'm up, everything's awake, we're getting ready for the day, we're going to eat breakfast, we're going to get going, we're going to make plans, we're going to do stuff today. Cortisol helps with that. By noontime, so in the morning it should be high, by noon it should drop down at like a 45-degree angle, and then it should drop down again around dinner, and it should drop down again at basically right before bed, so that cortisol is not high and interfering with your sleeping hormones. So cortisol, nice and high in the morning, drops down 45 degrees at lunch, drops down again at dinner, and again at like right before bedtime. Now, when cortisol and when your adrenaline is working 100 miles an hour all the time because you're constantly stressed, overworked, overtired, not taking time for yourself, and not healing properly, we will start to see where that gland says, you know what? I need more resources to make more cortisol. So it's going to say, here's what we need to do. We need more resources. So we're going to demand that the energy producing cells in our body, or mitochondria, give us their goods. I want all the stuff that you use to make energy because we need it to make cortisol, because that is a life-changing, has to work or I die function. Fight or flight has to work or you die. So your adrenal gland steals away all of the resources from mitochondria, and then you start to get fatigued. So if you are noticing that you are tired, whether it's after meals or specific times a day, or you sleep and it's like you didn't get any sleep because your body never was able to recuperate during sleep, it's because your adrenal gland is stealing away energy resources. So you do not have the energy capabilities to go through your day and you start getting fatigue and you start feeling overrun, and it doesn't matter what you do, you're like, okay, well, I stopped working out, I'm sleeping, I'm napping, and I still feel exhausted. This may be why. The other thing to realize is when adrenal gland is stealing away energy resources, say it's like, you know what, I took from mitochondria, but I still need more. So it's like, okay, we're going to go ahead, we don't care what she's like, if she's moody, if she has any sex drive, we're just going to go ahead and take those precursors away from your mood hormones and away from your sex hormones. So your libido crashes and you got no interest in that. You're super snippy, you're short with your kids, you're getting overwhelmed easily, you're like short fuse because your resources are getting stolen away by adrenal gland. Then your body's like, okay, adrenal gland needs more. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to go ahead and we're going to lower metabolism because let's face it, we don't care if you look good. We want you to be able to run away from this stressor. So we're going to go ahead and just put everything in storage, make you gain fat because we're going to need those resources. So forget it. We're not burning stuff. We're storing stuff. Shut down, fat burn, put everything into fat storage. It'll literally lower your metabolism. Then to top it off, we are also going to see that our precursors for our hormones that help manage blood pressure start to get interfered with. And we're going to start to see where our blood pressure tends to go up and down very quickly. Here's the thing, and here's a really good test that I think a lot of people don't realize is a sign of adrenal fatigue. If you are sitting in a chair and you stand up quickly and you get dizzy or see spots, that means that when you're sitting down and you stand up, your blood pressure has to rise 10 points to deal with the stress of going from sitting to standing. If you're seeing spots, if you're getting dizzy just from simply standing up, your body cannot deal with the stress of you standing because it's stolen away the blood pressure hormones that help manage blood pressure to actually bring blood flow to your head. Your body is so stressed, it can't even get blood to your brain because it's stolen away that hormone. So if you see spots when you stand up or you're getting dizziness, when you stand up quickly, that may be a sign that your adrenal gland has actually started affecting some of the hormones that help with blood pressure regulation and blood flow. That can affect causing issues with brain fog and not thinking clearly. That can also start to affect some of your vascular health as well. So we can start seeing cold hands and feet as a result of that too. We can also see cold hands and feet when some of those mood and libido hormones also get impacted. We will also see thyroid function. So your adrenal gland may actually say, you know what, thyroid, let's take it down a notch. I don't really care about your job. I need those resources. So sometimes thyroid issues, especially hypothyroidism, are not actually a thyroid issue. They're actually an adrenal issue where the adrenal gland basically told thyroid gland to shut down or slow down production because it needed those resources. So sometimes when I have patients that have thyroid issues, especially hypothyroidism, where they've on like levothyroxine or they're on Armour thyroid, they may actually have an adrenal issue, not a true thyroid issue going on that's a result of that. So sometimes if we can manage adrenal gland issues, we may see thyroid function improve. We may be able to get off of medication and not have to take that long term, which we know can be highly detrimental if you look at some of the long-term safety studies on thyroid medications. Another thing that can be affected, and I kind of alluded to this already, when adrenal gland is using resources to make cortisol and cortisol is high, your body will stop making some of your sleep hormones like melatonin and also GABA, which is a inhibitory neuron that basically helps your body calm down and your brain slow down and stop racing with thoughts before you go to bed. So if you've got thoughts racing, you're not tired, you can't get to sleep, even though you're exhausted, chances are your adrenal gland is stealing away and interfering with those sleep hormones. And one I think that is very important that I think I again alluded to earlier is depression and anxiety. So when your adrenal gland is stealing away resources, it will steal away some of the precursors that help with brain function, and that can actually interfere with some of the hormones, the neurotransmitters that help with depression and anxiety. So we can literally see all these different organ systems being affected by adrenal gland. So if you've been chasing symptoms and you got this going on and this going on and this going on and this going on, and you've been taking meds and doing this and doing this and doing this and then doing this, you may actually have an adrenal issue that's not being addressed properly. So one thing I do find is really, really helpful is when it comes to the adrenal gland and some of this function, you may want to look at researching the HPA axis disorder. So adrenal fatigue or adrenal insufficiency is one thing that a lot of people allude to and talk about. In the actual research, this is called HPA axis disorder. This is hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal gland. Those guys kind of work together and balance each other out. Hypothalamus, pituitary, our brain functions, and we can affect those a little bit with therapies and some other things. But adrenal, I think, is by far the easiest to affect. So if we have an off-balance HPA axis disorder, we can focus on adrenal support, which that's going to be a combination of diet and lifestyle changes, as well as sometimes some herbals and adaptogenic things that can help that adrenal gland work better. Lifestyle changes a lot of times focus on how to deal with stress, how to recuperate, and how to really focus on self-care physically, mentally, emotionally, as well as taking time for yourself and taking time to quiet your mind, not just get out the frustration with exercise. If you think you have an adrenal issue, I have seen a lot of doctors try to do blood testing. Typically, when you get blood tests done, they're done first thing in the morning. So you would expect cortisol to be high, but a lot of times I see issues where, yes, cortisol may be in normal range in the morning, but at say noon or dinner time, we see where it is way out of range. It's either high or low, or we're seeing a crash. And a lot of times for me, I think the saliva testing is better because we can do multiple samples in a day and track that graph to see a better idea about what's going on. I know Dutch testing does this as well. So typically that's a urine test. I personally am not a big fan of carrying around a urine jug and samples throughout the day. So I like the saliva test because it's tiny little tubies that can fit in a lunchbox. And it's really easy, basically take 4 samples in a single day. There is certain times of your menstrual cycle that has to be done if you are menstruating. But typically that is a great test because you can see, number one, if you are having a struggle at a certain time of day, and then you know when you need to employ some of those dietary and lifestyle changes and the adaptogenic herbs to really help. So I think it's much more eye-opening as to what's going on in your body. That way you know when you need to support it, and you're not necessarily just kind of throwing supplements throughout the day. You know when you need them the most. So I think it's a little bit better to do, like I said, in my opinion, the saliva testing personally. All right, and last thing today, we're going to talk about how toxins can be eliminated safely. So I mentioned earlier that fat cells are a useless tissue. Guess where your body stores toxins? Because we don't want to release them out in the bloodstream to cause damage in our bodies, but your body will store toxins in your fat cells. So your body will store toxins in your fat cells in the basically with the idea that we do not want to release those toxins out, because if we can't get rid of them through detoxification pathways like your liver, like your urine, like your stool, like your sweat, your body's like, okay, if we can't get rid of them, it's not safe to have them here. Just go ahead and put it in the fat. We're going to leave them there until we're ready to deal with them. Here's the thing. If you have toxins stored in your fat cells, your body's going to actually put water in with them. So we may have water as well as toxins stored in our fat cells, and your body will literally not want to or allow you to lose weight because it doesn't want to release those toxins. So when it comes to toxin elimination, we need to make sure that we are supporting when we try to lose fat or when we're trying to lose and shrink those fat cells. We need to make sure that we understand that your body will literally lower metabolism to basically prevent those from being eliminated. So that can cause weight gain. A lot of that is water weight. So when we do detox programs, a lot of times we lose a ton of water weight up front if you've had toxins stored in your body. And a lot of times we'll see metabolism boost when we do detoxification as well. It's really important to realize that when we want to eliminate toxins, we need to not only make sure that we have the right things to pull them out of our cells, because not only do we get toxins stored in our fat cells in our abdomen, we can also get some of those toxins stored in the fat cells in our brain, because guess what? Your brain is made of cholesterol and fat. So we can actually have toxins stored that have crossed the blood-brain barrier and are stored inside of our brain. So when we release those toxins, they can cause brain fog. They can cause neurologic issues in addition to making you feel sick. I've had some patients that had like crazy headaches when they do detox. I have had some patients that have had like really weird sweat, vomiting, like crazy symptoms, diarrhea, constipation, you name it. I've seen all sorts of weird stuff when their body detoxes. So we want to make sure that we have the proper things to help eliminate those. Now, normally when it comes to detoxification packets or kits, I have seen a lot that are fiber and laxatives. So they basically just make you poop. When you do those, you're not really like pulling the toxins out of your fat cells in your brain or your body. So I recommend doing a high quality cleanse. I know in my office, we have a product called BioCleanse that helps to actually pull those out of the cells. Along with that, I recommend at a bare minimum that we also have a vitamin C. If we have possible like heavy metal toxins in our body, I also recommend doing like a activated charcoal for a short period of time to help bind those so they can be safely eliminated through the stool. Because let's face it, you don't want toxins floating around your bloodstream and causing issue, because that can be really dangerous. If you have those toxins kind of floating around, those can affect organ function. Those can cause organ damage. Those can cause brain damage and nerve damage and neurologic issues. So it's very important to understand that when you do detox the right way, you need other supportive things. Like I said, typically I recommend not only a BioCleanse, but a very high quality vitamin C with it. For some patients, I do recommend doing an activated charcoal. If I have patients that have digestive issues and potential problems with bacteria imbalance, I may recommend doing a almost like a reset for the intestine with a herbal that interferes with bad bacteria production. I may also recommend a probiotic as well. There's a lot of different things that sometimes I recommend, just depending on the patient and what's going on for them. So if you haven't talked to a holistic provider that does detoxification, you may want to meet with them before you do a detox program to make sure you have everything and all your ducks in a row, so you're not going to have any dangerous side effects from that detox. Like I said, precautions, really important to understand that there are certain ways that your body gets rid of toxins. So we have fat-soluble toxins. These are like metabolic end products, microorganisms, so bacteria, as well as I've also seen like yeast and things like that, any contaminants and or pollutants that were coming from our food. So we have a lot of pesticides that are coming in our food products, microplastics as well, insecticides, pesticides, food additives, drugs, alcohol, all of those are fat soluble. So basically your body will take those toxins and will try to break them down, bind them with specific nutrients, and then it'll try to eliminate those through the waste. So we do have water soluble waste that can be eliminated through basically the kidneys and through the urine. We have some that have to be eliminated through gallbladder, bile, and the stool. And we have some that can only be eliminated through like skin cells. So we can only eliminate those through our sweat glands. So there are some things typically where you're trans fats that we have issues with that. So if we have a lot of acne or skin irritation, sometimes we may actually have toxins being eliminated through the sweat glands that need to be cleansed or managed a little bit better. So for a recap for today, I'm not sure why I picked this picture. It was just kind of like the end of the presentation. I just thought it was funny. He's eating healthy food, but maybe not necessarily the best way. So recap for today, make sure you track your progress, not just a number on the scale. Make sure you are, number 2, focus on sustainable eating habits. We want to make sure that we have the best habits in place so that we can support our body's natural digestive processes and how we move things around our body. We also want to make sure we are focusing on building muscle so that we get long-term results in higher metabolism. We want to get digestive issues managed holistically. So if you have digestive issues, any of the ones that I mentioned when we talked about digestion, you want to make sure you get an idea about what's going on, manage those holistically, not just covering them up with medications like Tums or any type of like antacid or beta blockers. We also want to make sure we feed our hormones protein, because we talked about why protein makes up our hormones, but also helps to feed them so they're working properly. And we also want to make sure that if we possibly have some hormone issues going on, we want to get them tested. So if you have thyroid issues, I recommend doing a full thyroid panel, not just TSH and T3, T4, but TSH, pre-T3, pre-T4, reverse T3, as well as your thyroid antibodies, so we make sure there's no autoimmune conditions going on. I do recommend getting, when you get your adrenal hormones tested, we want to check cortisol multiple times throughout the day. I also recommend getting DHEA tested. If we have fertility issues or we have some menstrual difficulties or tend to have very heavy bleeding or a lot of symptoms during cycle, I also recommend adding in and doing estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. I know my saliva test that I do in my office checks cortisol 4 times throughout the day, DHEA. It also checks your estradiol, your progesterone, your testosterone, and the ratio of estrogen, progesterone to make sure it's at its peak at that specific time of your cycle where it's supposed to be. Because a lot of times I'll see where progesterone may be in range on a blood test, but during that 3-day window when it should be high, it can't get up there because adrenal glands stole it away. That's called progesterone steal. And then we also want to make sure we detox safely at least once a year or more often if you tend to be exposed to things that can tend to build up in your cells. If you need help or you need a second opinion, please do not be afraid to ask. My office, we have a website called freedompeoria.org. You can go on there and request a consultation. We also have a lot of great resources on our YouTube channel, Health and Horsepower. I'm going to try to link to those videos down here. We'll see how that works. I've never done it before, so we'll see how that works, but I will try to link those here so that you have access to those and can also learn a little bit more about hormones and a little bit more about stress and how that affects your body. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I really do hope that you learned a lot. And I feel like if you need extra help, you need extra advice, I know Ashley is an absolute amazing resource for helping you connect with somebody locally or even connecting you with some resources. But if you need extra help, please do not be afraid to reach out and talk to me. So have a great rest of your day and have a great rest of your week. I know I will be doing a Q&A with Ashley, I think later next week. So if you have any questions, make sure you take notes, write those questions down, and I will see you guys when I do that Q&A.